This is from the Mammoth. No, not the little, not the small, not the large, not the really big. The Mammoth Book of Irish Romance. The Ballad of Rosamunde by Claire Delacroix. And it's set in Galway. Um, not Galloway, which might have been cool, but close anyway. Galway, Ireland, in April 1422, the year of our Lord. The hour was late and the tavern was crowded. If I had a nickel for every. Patrick sat on the hearth. I gotta put it in there. Some of the names are just so cool. It is Patrick, like Patrick, but he says it's there. Padraig. Patrick sat near the hearth, watching the firelight play over the faces of the men gathered there. The ale launched a warm hum within him, the closest he was ever likely to be to the heat of the Mediterranean sun again. He should have gone south, as Rosamund had bidden him to do. He should have sold her ship and its contents, as she had instructed him to do. Galway was as far as he had managed to sail from Kinfairly, and he had only come this far because his crew had compelled him to leave this site of disaster, where Rosamund had been lost to him forever. But instead, Patrick returned home to his mother's grave in the tavern run by his sister. Patrick enjoyed music, always had, and song was the only solace he found in the absence of Rosamund's company. He found his foot tapping, his cares lifting as a local man sang of adventure. "A song! A song!" someone cried when one rollicking tune came to an end. "Who else has a song?" "Patrick!" shouted his sister. Now, his sister was a pretty woman, albeit one who tolerated no nonsense. Patrick suspected there were those more afraid of her than her husband. "Sing the sad one you began the other night," his sister entreated. There are others of better voice," Patrick protested. The company roared protest in unison, and so he acquiesced. Now Patrick sipped his ale, and then pushed to his feet to sing the ballad of his own composition. Rosamund was a pirate queen, with hair red of gold and eyes of green. A trade in relics did she pursue, plus perfume and silks of every hue. Her ship's hold was a rich treasury of prizes gathered on every sea. But the fairest gem in all the hold was Rosamund, beauteous and bold. Her blade was quick, her foresight sharp. She conquered hearts in every port. "Aye," sighed the older man across the table from Patrick. "There be a woman worth the loss of one's heart." The company nodded approval and leaned closer for the next verse. His sister stopped serving and leaned against the largest keg in the tavern, smiling as she watched Patrick. "She vanquished foes on every sea, but lost her heart to a man esteemed. Surrender was not her nature true, but bowed with desires she did do. She left the sea to become his bride, but in her lover's home Rosamund died. The man she loved was not her worth." Patrick faltered. His compatriots in the tavern waited expectantly, but he could not think of a suitable rhyme. He remembered the side of Ravimur's cliffs, caverns collapsing, his men holding him back so he wouldn't risk his life to save Rosamund. He put down his tankard with dissatisfaction, singing the last line again softly. The man she loved was not her worth. But it made no difference. He had composed 100 rhymes, if not 1,000. But this particular tale caught in his throat like none other. "Her absence was to all a death," his sister suggested. Her husband snorted. "You have no music in your veins, woman, and that much is for certain." "The son she bore him died at birth," the old man across the table suggested. Patrick shook his head and frowned. "No, was no child." "Well, it could be," the old man insisted. "'Tis only a tale, after all." The others laughed with him. Yes, but this was not only a tale. It was the truth. Rosamund had existed. She had been a pirate queen. She had been both beauteous and bold. And she had been lost forever, thanks to the faithlessness of the man to whom she had surrendered everything. Patrick mourned that truth every day and night of his life. He cursed Tinin Lammergire, the man who had cost him the company of Rosamunde, and he hated that they two might be together forever in some afterlife. It was wrong that a man who had not been able to accept Rosamunde for her true nature should win her company for all eternity. Because Padraig had loved Rosamunde truly. His mother had warned him that he would be smitten once and his heart lost forever. But he had held his tongue. He had spoken of a friendship in his parting with Rosamunde, not the fullness of his heart. Now he would never have the chance to remedy his error. It had been almost 6 months since Rosamunde had gone into the caverns beneath Ravensmuir, Tynan's ancestral keep on the coast of Scotland. 6 months since those caves had collapsed and Rosamunde had been lost forever, and still Patrick's wound was raw. He doubted it would ever heal. He knew he'd never meet the like of her again. Padraig sat down and drank deeply of his ale. Let another sing, he said. I'm too besotted to compose the verse. Another tale, shouted the keeper. Come, Liam, sing that one of the Faerie host. The company stamped their feet and applauded, as Liam was clearly a local favourite, and Padraig saw a lanky man rise to his feet on the far side of the room. He, however, had lost his taste for tales. He abandoned the rest of his ale. He left a coin on the board and headed for the door. We'll miss your custom this evening, his sister said softly as he passed her. Her dark eyes shone brightly in the shadowed tavern, and he doubted that she missed any detail. A man should be valued for more than the volume of ale he can drink, Padraig replied, blaming himself for what he had become. His sister flushed and turned away as if he had chided her. He could do nothing right, not without Rosamunde. Was her loss to be the shadow over all his days and nights? Far beneath the hills to the north of Galway, Finvara, High King of the Danes, dimpled his fingers and considered the chessboard. The High King was quite a fan of games. It was a beautiful chessboard, with pieces of alabaster and obsidian, the board itself fashioned of agate and ebony with fine enamel work around the perimeter. When Finvara touched a piece, it came to life, moving across the board at his unspoken will. His entire Fae court gathered around the game, watching his bright eyes. Much like the one aboard the Millennium Falcon, I presume. Finvara was tall and slim, finely wrought even for the Fae, who were uncommonly handsome. His eyes were as dark as the midnight sky, his long hair the deep blue-black of the sea and darkness, his skin as fair as moonlight, his tread as light as wind in the grass. He was possessed of both kindness and resolve, and ruled the Fae well. Finvara's hall at Knockma was under the hill, and as lavish a court as could be found. The ladies wore glistening gowns of finest silk, their gossamer wings painted with 1,000 colours, much like Crashly's. The courtiers were armed in silver finery, their manners both fierce and gallant, their eyes glinting with humour. The horses of Finvara's court were spirited and fleet of foot, gleaming and beauteous in their rich trappings hung with silver bells. He had steeds of every colour, red stallions and white mares, black stallions and mahogany mares with ivory socks. Each and every one was caparisoned in finery to show its hue and strength to advantage. The mead was sweet and golden in Finvara's hall, and the cups at the board filled themselves with more when no one was looking. Now that's the kind of cup I need. Oh, we've got one right here on the stage, and it's full of absinthe. Perfect. But all the fairy court was silent, clustered around their king's favourite chessboard. They watched, knowing that more than victory at a game hung in the balance, as usual. Finvara did not care for low stakes. Finvara played to win. And the Spriggan, Darg, sat opposite the king and fidgeted. Recently in Scotland, this small, thieving fairy had travelled to Ireland in the hold of the ship of Patrick Dean, a blue-eyed and handsome pirate possessed of a broken heart. Caught trespassing in Finvara's She, a crime punishable by death, the Spriggan played for its life now. Finvara, in truth, tired of the game. The spoils were not so remarkable, and the Spriggan was a mediocre component. The splendor of the board, indeed, he felt, was wasted upon the rough little creature. Certainly his skill was. Then Finvara heard the distant lilt of a human song. Rosamund was a pirate queen with rare red gold and eyes of green. As was common with Finvara, the mention of a beauteous mortal woman piqued his interest. He turned his head to listen, just as the Spriggan interrupted with a hiss. A laughing trickster Rosamund did be, but she did not have the best of me. You knew this mortal? Darg raised a fist. Stole from me, that she dared. I did steal her from her laird. She would be dead but for me. Now she owes me her fealty. The Spriggan cackled and moved a pawn with care. It was a poor choice. Not dead, but enchanted she doth be, while I choose what my vengeance shall be. Intrigued, Finvara snapped his fingers, and his wife Una brought his silver mirror to his hand. She knew him well. She caressed his hand as she passed the mirror to him. But Finvara ignored her gesture of affection. Finvara did not imagine Una's sniff of displeasure. But Una's pleasure was not his concern, not when there was a beauteous woman to be possessed. He murmured to the mirror, and its surface swiveled before his eyes. The image of this Rosamund appearing so suddenly that Finvara caught his breath. Then his blood quickened. Una, always able to read his response, spun on her heel. She strode from the hall, her ladies scurrying after like so many sparrows. Finvara was oblivious to his wife's mood. This Rosamund was not just beautiful, but spirited. Finvara had to know more. He touched the queen, his favorite piece, sliding his finger up her carved back. She strolled across the board in perfect understanding of his intent, halted on the desired spot, and tucked her hands into her sleeves meekly. As if only all queens might be so biddable. Check, Finvara murmured with a smile. No, I shall not die, not by your whim. The Spriggan erupted from its place in fury, jumping across the board and kicking pieces left and right. I demand we play the game again. Finvara shook his head. The Spriggan scattered the pieces onto the earthen floor, then lunged at Finvara. There was no contest between them, the Spriggan being only as tall as the king's golden chalice. Finvara struck the ill-tempered creature with the back of his hand, sending it sprawling across the floor. The elegantly attired Fae stepped away from the Spriggan, whispering at its poor manners. It hissed at all of the then made to run. 2 elfin knights seized it, holding tightly while it bit and struggled. I have no interest in your life, Finvara said with a soft authority. The Spriggan froze, staring at him in confusion. It was a crafty creature, and Finvara deliberately stated its terms so that there could be no deception. I would trade your life for a specific treasure in your possession. Darg's eyes narrowed into hostile slits. No gem do I see fit to spare. The woman, Finvara decreed, interrupting what would likely be an impolite diatribe. I trade your life for that of your captive, Rosamund. The Spriggan regarded him warily. I fear you make a jest of me, and would be freed, for I agree. Finvara rose and clapped his hands. There is no jest. When Rosamund graces my court, you shall be free to leave. He reached forward and snatched at the Spriggan, holding it so surely in his grip that it paled. He lowered his face to its sharp features, glaring into its eyes. Darg squirmed. Deceive me, though, and I will have your life as well as the woman. Darg's eyes gleamed, and Finvara knew the creature would be willingly to deceive him. He beckoned to his armorer, who produced a fine red thread at his master's bidding. Finvara knotted that thread securely around the Spriggan's waist. It appeared to be made of silk, but was strong beyond measure, and it held the Spriggan to Finvara's command. The small fairy struggled and fought against the bond, grimacing where it touched the skin. It binds, it does, the knot too tight, Darg snarled. You cheat when I would do what's right. Only I can unbind this thread, and I will only do so when you have fulfilled our bargain. Darg continued to pluck at the thread, its displeasure clear. It cast a glance over the company, then its lips tightened. He straightened and addressed Finvara with surprising hauteur. As you command, so it shall be. You shall see that Darg lives honestly. Finvara smothered a laugh. He didn't doubt that the creature would try to break both cord and vow, but he knew such efforts were doomed to failure. Tomorrow's sunset, he decreed. I would have her by my side for Briltina 2 nights hence. The brigand grimaced at the time constraint, but before it could agree, Finvara made a dismissive gesture. It's enough time. Should it not be? He raised a brow, and the thread bound around the brigand's waist tightened at increment. Darg screamed, swore agreement, then scampered across the court, murdering. 3 elven knights followed at a discreet distance, ensuring that it left the hall upon its mission. Finvara eyed the path Una had taken, heard the distant sound of her sobs, and decided to remain in his hall a bit longer. He clapped and called for music, for he was feeling as celebratory as Una was not. After all, soon he would have a new prize to savor. Rosamunde dreamed. If she had been asked, she would have said that her expectation was a dream of Tinan through all eternity. But her dream took her further into the past, to an abbey on the coast of Ireland. She had been summoned there by the bishop, anxious to increase the revenue of his remote diocese with the acquisition of a holy relic. One of the bishop's men had eyes of brilliant blue and a steady gaze. She strove to ignore him. The bishop purchased a perfumed braid said to have come from Mary, daughter of Lazarus. They negotiated the price, the coin was counted, and then deposited into Rosamunde's purse. She sensed that the man with the blue gaze thought the bishop intended to cheat her. Outside, Rosamunde was glad to see her ship. She emitted a high whistle and signaled to Thomas, waiting to the dinghy just out of sight. She was not prepared to find Thomas dead, bleeding in the bottom of that boat. She was not prepared to have a man assault her in the darkness, the purse ripped from her belt, her blade snatched. And she certainly was not expecting the blue-eyed man to leap out of the shadows behind her attacker, slicing him from gullet to groin and kicking his carcass into the sea. I sicken of his thievery, he said softly, his voice as steady as his gaze. Why, thank you for your aid. You're most welcome. I fear I have lost my employ this night. Have you need of another man on your ship? Rosamunde found herself liking this man a great deal. I always have need of men with stout hearts and quick blades. Have you a name? Padraig Dean. Rosamunde shook his hand, liking the heat of his skin, the firmness of his grip. Welcome, Padraig. There's no better compliment than knowing a man can be trusted with one's own life. She watched the moonlight play in his muscles as he rowed them back to the ship. He was determined, stalwart, unafraid. Rosamunde wondered how she had failed to see the full merit of Padraig on all the years he had served her. What lifted the scales from her eyes now? Padraig wandered the streets of Galway, paying no attention to his course until he reached the gate in the Norman wall. He glanced back towards the harbour, then ahead to the hills cloaked in starlight and shadow. He chose to pass through the gate and walk out of town, knowing that the way was not without risk. He was but half Irish, half of town, half of country, though there were those who would have little interest in the details. He did not care about his fate as much as he once had, and he had no taste for human company on this night. He walked as the moon rose ever higher in the sky. He walked as the church bells sounded far behind him. He walked as the stars glinted overhead. And he heard the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, the tinkle of running water. He felt the ale loosen its hold upon his body and grief well in his heart. He paused in the middle of the road, hours after his departure, and cast a glance back towards the sleeping town. His feet ached, and he knew he should turn back. Padraig had just made to do so when he heard a woman singing more beautifully than ever he had heard anyone singing. It could have been an angel he heard, and he was drawn to the sound. He could not hear the words and hastened closer. Una was a fairy queen, fairest woman ever seen. Wed centuries to a king, love meant more to her than his ring. The ground rose ahead of Padraig in a mound, a low hill covered with grass. A circle of large stones surrounded the crest of the hill like a crown upon it, and a hawthorn tree grew outside the circle of stones. The hair prickled on the back of his neck, for he had learned his mother's need to be cautious in the presence of the Fae. If nothing else, this was the kind of place they favored. He could barely discern the silhouette of a woman atop the hill. She was sitting on a stone in the midst of a circle, combing her long hair, and he knew she was the one who sang. 2 women sat at her feet, one with a lyre and the like of Padraig had never seen, the other humming along with the lady. They were all lovely, ethereal in the moonlight. Her voice had a lovely lilt, and Padraig wished to see more of her song. He walked closer, trying to move silently as he didn't want to startle the women. To his astonishment, as soon as he stepped within that circle of stones, the lady with the comb turned to confront him. She smiled, her hand falling to her lap as she sang directly at him. With proximity, he could see more than her silhouette. Her hair was golden, as bright as sunlight. Her eyes were as blue as the southern sea. Padraig walked closer, awed by her loveliness. But Finvara had an appetite for mortal women, both dark and light. He vowed he'd have the pirate queen, held captive by the spriggan's greed. One glimpse of the fair Rosamunde had left him filled with lust and love, and so his wife did come to dread her spouse taking Rosamunde to his bed. Padraig blinked. Surely she could not be singing of his Rosamunde. The woman stood up, revealing that she was tall and slender. She wore a dress that was fitted to her curves and swept to her ankles. It was as blue as her eyes, rich with golden embroidery and gems encrusting the hem and cuffs. It seemed to Padraig that her slippers were made of silk the color of moonlight, or perhaps she was wrought of moonlight herself. She seemed insubstantial as she walked towards him, both of this world and not. Was he dreaming? The hem of her skirt seemed to dance with a will of its own. The lights glinted around the perimeter of the stone circle. He remembered the will-o'-the-wisp from his childhood, and he knew that he had strayed into the realm of the Fae. Only when the woman was directly before him did he see the numerous small courtiers holding the hem. They could not have stood as high as his knee, not a one of them. They were dressed in green livery. Their faces were sharp, their eyes narrow, and their hair caught with twigs. Padraig remembered her own words and knew who he encountered. This was the fairy queen, Una. "Greetings, Padraig, sailor of the many seas," she said, her voice as melodious in speech as in song. "Greetings, beauteous queen." Padraig bowed deeply, knowing well the price of insulting one of the Fae. "Perhaps you have guessed that I have summoned you here. I heard your song, and I knew what our goals could be as one." "You heard my song?" Padraig glanced over his shoulder, unable to glimpse the lights of town. "I was miles away. You could not possibly have heard." Una laid a fingertip across his lips to silence him. Her touch was as cold as ice, or as smooth as silken velvet. She smiled. "She is not dead, your Rosamunde." Her lips tightened, averted her gaze. "And now my husband, casting his glance over all of Faerie with the aid of his treacherous mirror, has glimpsed the slumbering Rosamunde. He means to make her his own, and Biltuna. I mean no offense, my lady, but Rosamunde is dead." Padraig spoke with a care. He knew of the Fae inclination to trick mortals. "I saw the fallen rock. I tried to retrieve her from the destroyed caverns. She cannot have survived in any way." Una smiled. "The spriggan Darg took her captive when she might have died." "Darg," Padraig exclaimed. He recalled this deceitful spriggan well, and his determination to have vengeance upon Rosamunde. Una watched him carefully. "You know this creature?" "Indeed I do, my lady, although I believe the spriggan to be yet at Ravensmuir." No. It came in your ship." Padraig frowned. There had been items disappeared on their last voyage, including the ale that he knew the spriggan liked so well. It was possible Una spoke the truth. "It trespassed on our she, and is wagered with my husband and lost. So we'll bring Rosamunde to him tomorrow. You must steal her from him." "My lady, a man who steals from the fairy king will not live to tell the tale of it." Una smiled. "With my aid, you will not be detected." She pressed a golden ring into his hand. "Wear this, and you shall pass unseen in any company." The ring was cold as the tomb. Even having it in his hand filled Padraig with dread. He was not afraid to risk his life for Rosamunde, not even of inciting the wrath of the Fae King, but there was one more thing he needed to know. "With respect, my lady, I would be certain of the desire of Rosamunde. It seems to me that it would be most fine to live at the fairy court. She might not wish to leave with me." Una laughed, but not because of his compliment. "You must have heard the old riddle, the one with truth at its heart." "Which is that, my lady?" Her eyes glinted with humor. "What gift is it that a woman wishes most from a man?" Padraig shrugged, not knowing the answer. Riches, comfort, love. There are so many possible answers that he could not choose. He suspected the answer depended upon the woman. Una leaned closer. To have her own way. Her eyes shone with brilliant light as courtiers giggled around them. I suspect you're a worthy lover, Padraig Keen, and in tribute to your love I give you a gift. You've already been too kind. Before Padraig could finish, the Fairy Queen framed his face in her hands. She leaned closer, her cold breath caressing his skin, and then she kissed him full on the lips. He tasted death and loss, a chill that shook him to his marrow, and Padraig swooned. Rosamund dreamed of another day from her past. The sky was pink, a sure sign of trouble in the morning, and the dark clouds racing overhead made no better forecast. All the same, Rosamund's heart leaped from the familiar cliffs that rose before her. The cliffs surmounted her the keep she knew as well as the lines of her own land, Ravensmuir. Governed by Tinnin, stern but fair, the man who had taken her to his bed, the man who had vowed subsequently never to wed her, the man who had chosen this pile of stones over her. Twice. In her dream, she was certain she would relive that last encounter, that final, fatal rejection, but she did not. She dreamed instead, again, of Padraig. Rosamund stood on the deck of her ship, staring up at the land rose closer, her heart pounding with trepidation that Tinnin would see her approach, that he would meet her in the caverns below the keep. She was in the moment of approach, felt her own hope of anticipation, and yet at the same time knew what had happened subsequently in those caverns. She felt the twinge of dread that she had felt that morning and knew that it had been a warning. Although Tinnin had apologized to her, he had once again chosen his holding over her. And he had died. But had she not died as well? Padraig came to stand beside her on the deck, but this time when Rosamund turned to her most trusted friend, she saw him with clear eyes. He was tall and hale, was Padraig, experience tempering his expression and his choices. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, she noted, and there were lines from laughter etched around his eyes. His tan made his eyes look more vividly blue, and she was struck by his vitality, by his masculinity. With the clarity of hindsight, she saw what she had missed day after day in his company. Padraig was of an age with her, and they had shared 1,000 adventures. He was unafraid of her truth, much less of her temper. He was quick to laughter. He was clever. He dared to challenge her when he believed her to be wrong. He was deeply loyal, and she had always been able to rely upon him. Her heart began to pound at the magnitude of her error, at her own blind folly. I will go into the caverns alone, she said, feeling the words she had once uttered as they crossed her tongue in this dream. Her quest had been the retrieval of a silver ring, once given to her by Tinnin, demanded by the Spriggan Darg as the price of his assistance, but returned by her to Tinnin after his rejection. It had not been hers to take, but on this day she had returned to steal it and ensure the future of her niece. I will accompany you, Padraig said, determination in his voice. They shared this resolve to protect those they loved. Rosamund realized this ability to stride into the shadows so others would not be compelled to do so. She and Padraig had walked the periphery of society together, daring all as they challenged convention, at each other's backs. While Tinnin had upheld convention, he had found Rosamund useful. He accepted her favors abed, but he had never respected her or intended to honor her. It was no surprise in hindsight to realize that Tinnin could never have loved her in truth. No, not this time, she argued in her dream, just as she had argued on that fateful morning. She saw Padraig for what he was. She saw the ardor in his eyes. She saw his fear for her. She saw his valor, his loyalty, and she guessed the secret of his heart. And Rosamund regretted that she had surrendered her love to the wrong man. She had suspected as much on that day. The ghost of the realization had teased at her thoughts, urged her to choose otherwise, made her words tumble forth with uncharacteristic haste. Take the ship, she told Padraig, in this dream as she had then. See me ashore, then take the ship and sail south to Sicily. It had been their jest all those years that they would one day sell everything and live out their lives in Sicily. They had both preferred the sun's sultry heat there to the chill of the north. Well, what of the contents? Padraig's displeasure was clear. Sell them wherever you can fetch a fair price for them, and keep the proceeds for your own. But I owe you no less for all your years of faithful service, Padraig. It was a facile lie, and they both had known it even then. But the ship? Sell it as well. Or keep it for your own. I don't care. Padraig, I don't care. Rosamund uttered that heartfelt sigh, acknowledging the shadow of dread that touched her heart. I have had wealth, and I have had love. Love is better. It was a lie. She had never had Tennant's love. She had the illusion of his love and had been seduced by that. She had had no more than the physical expression of his love, and that was a paltry offering at that. On the other hand, Rosamund saw in her dream that Padraig's love had been before her, awaiting her invitation for years. You will fare well enough, she said in her dreams, and the declaration of her gift of foresight struck her as ironic. I have seen it, and we know that whatsoever I see will be true. What do you see for yourself? Padraig asked softly, his survey of her so searching that Rosamund could scarce hold his gaze. He frowned and looked away. I always said you saw farther than most, but could not see what was before your own eyes. There was truth in his claim that she had missed on that red-stained morning. She declared her destiny to be a Ravensmuir, seeing in her dream how the notion displeased Padraig. How could she have missed such an offering? How could she have overlooked the affection of one who knew her better than she knew herself? She had been a fool and lost her life because of it. If only she had another chance, she would seize the opportunity Padraig presented her. Farewell, Padraig, she heard herself say. May the wind always fill your sails when you have need of it. And Padraig embraced her, catching her close. She could feel the muscle strength of him, the resolve of him, the power he oft held in check. In her dream, she closed her eyes and savored what she had lost through her own folly. His voice was husky when he spoke. We have fought back to back 100 times, Rosamund, and I will always, always consider you to be my friend. His blue eyes filled with heat as he regarded her. You have been my only friend, but a friend of such merit that I need no other. No soul ever had a friend more loyal than I found in you, she said, her heart aching at her own folly. I did, Padraig said, his words fierce. His gaze bored into hers, and he turned away, staring at the cliffs of Ravensmuir. I did, he added softly. And in her dream, Rosamund did what she should have done on that day. She reached out. She touched Padraig's shoulder. She saw his surprise when he turned towards her. Then she caught him close, hearing the thunder of her own pulse in her own ears, and kissed him. It was a sweet, hot kiss, a kiss that sent a torrent of longing through her. It was a kiss tinged with regret, filled with love, a kiss of yearning and potency. It left her dizzy. It left her hot. It left Rosamund wide awake and blinking at a ceiling she could not place. Was she not dead? Well, it appeared not. She was simply alone. She touched her lips, caught her breath, and dared to wish. Padraig awoke abruptly, his heart racing, his breath coming in quick spurts. He was hot and tight, and the taste of Rosamund was upon his lips. He had also slept apparently in the field. The sun was rising in the east, gilding the hills and setting the dewdrops ablaze. He stared around himself. He was alone. He was cold. His clothing was damp with dew. The stone circle was a dozen steps away, silent in its secrets. The women were gone, if indeed they had ever existed. There was no music echoing in his ears. No lyre, no small fairies, no footsteps in the grass. Padraig heard a man shout at a cow as he drove her along the road to town. He ran his fingers through his hair and his tongue across his lips. He tasted the kiss of Rosamund again, closing his eyes at the rush of pleasure he felt beneath her touch. Rosamund had never kissed him, except in his dream. He had indulged too much the night before. It was the ale confounding him, feeding his desire, leading him astray. Padraig shoved to his feet, grimacing at the distance he had to walk back to town. His feet were still sore and his head ached. He had made to brush himself down, removing the twigs strewn across his clothes, and realized there was something in his hand. It was a stone. The stone was round with a hole in the middle of it. It was the color of gold. Was this the golden ring he believed the Faerie Queen had given him? Padraig smiled at his own foolish dream. He had been in his cups for sure. Still, a stone of such shape was unusual. It might be lucky. He was possessed of all the superstitions of a seafaring man and a few more besides. Courtesy of his mother's upbringing in these hills and a respect for the Fae. If nothing else, it would be an error to cast the gift aside where the donor might witness his rudeness. Padraig pushed the stone into his pocket and strode through the damp grass, and as he walked back to his accommodations in Galway, he savored the memory of Rosamund's kiss. Even in a dream, it had been a sweet prize and was enough to put a spring in his step. But Rosamund, she had not died. In truth, she breathed still. She was a captive of the Fae and lost beneath the hill. Such marvel she did see while there, such beauty wondrous still, till Rosamund did not wish to be captive beneath the hill. The Spriggan Darg was not a creature Rosamund was glad to see. Solitude was better in the company of this thing. That the small fairy had a red cord knot around its waist was curious, and surely did not improve the creature's mood. It hissed and spat, pinching her to wake her up, and nipping at her heels to hurry her along. Make haste, make haste! The king is not inclined to wait. Where are we going? I thought Faerie was like Limbo. Darg chattered unintelligibly, as was its tendency when it was annoyed. The creature led her more deeply into the caverns beneath Ravensmew, and Rosamund was glad to leave her past behind. It wasn't truly the caverns beneath Ravensmew, though. Those caves and their pathways were well known to Rosamund, having been her secret passage to the keep for decades. As a child, she had played in them, learning their labyrinth, delighting in their secret corners, but they were dank and made of grey stone, dark and filled with the distant tinkle of running water. She did not know the passageways that Darg followed. Rosamund had never spied that entry lit with golden light until the collapse of the cavern and the death of Tiernan. She suspected that Darg had opened a portal for her, but knew not where it truly was. This cavern could not be fairly called a cave or even a labyrinth. Indeed, Rosamund did not feel as if she were underground at all. There was a brilliant golden sunlight, the light that had spilled from the unexpected portal. The sky arched high, clear blue over verdant fields. The air was filled with music and fine singing, and every soul she saw was beautiful. It took Rosamund a while to realize that she only saw nobility. There were aristocrats riding and hunting, borne by finely draped steeds so majestic in stature that the beasts rivaled the famed destroyers of Ravensmew. The women were dressed in silk and samite, their garb of every hue, their long hair flowing over their shoulders or braided into plaits. They wore coronets of flowers, and gems were plentiful in their clothing, even wound into their hair. Many played instruments as they rose. Golden flutes and silver lyres abounded in this strange country. The women's laughter sounded like music as well. As the men were just as well wrought, tall, slim, and muscular, there was a glint of mischief in every eye. Their armor shone as if it were made of silver. Their banners were beautifully embroidered. Their steeds galloped proudly, arched their necks. Silver bells hung from every bridle. The land itself was bountiful, the trees lush with fruit and flowers blooming on every side. Rosamund thought she saw fruit of gold and silver and flowers wrought of precious jewels, but Darg did not delay their passage so she could look more closely. Birds sang from every tree, their song blending so beautifully with the ladies' tunes that Rosamund felt they made music together. Just passing through the beauty of this realm, even at Darg's killing pace, lightened Rosamund's heart. Thank you, Gideon. It healed her wounds, made her believe that she might live on, even without love. It made her think of the future with an optimism that she had believed lost. It made her wonder where Padraig was. It made her wonder how she might get from here to there. Where are we? She shouted to Darg, who hastened ahead of her, muttering all the while, A foolish mortal you must be to not know the land of Faerie. Faerie. Rosamund was a pragmatic woman, one who had never believed in matters unseen or places to which she could not navigate. Was she dreaming? A butterfly lit on her shoulder, its wings fairly dripping with color, its beauty far beyond that of any earthly insect. Rosamund believed with a start it was a tiny winged woman. The fairy laughed at her surprise, a sound like tinkling bells, then darted away, disappeared into the blue sky with a glimmer. And why do we not linger in this magical realm? Rosamund asked Darg. Late we are, late we must not be. Finvara waits impatiently. The Spriggan tugged again at the red cord knotted around its waist. It spat in the grass with displeasure, then snatched at Rosamund. Hasten, hasten, by the moon's rise. We must be safely at his side. Who is Finvara? Why do we go to him? Questions, questions instead of haste. Your queries do the daylight waste. We have far to go without rest. Finvara will accept no less. They crossed a bridge. The river running beneath it looked to be made of mead. Rosamund caught a whiff of its honeyed sweetness and saw a cluster of bees hovering up the shore. A beautifully dressed suitor offered a golden chalice of the liquid to his lady, who flushed, fluttered both wings and lashes, and accepted his tribute. But why do we go to this Finvara? Who is he, and what hold has he over you? The brigand spun round abruptly, facing Rosamund with fury in its eyes. A match I lost, the price my life. His demand was you as his new wife. High King of Faerie is his task, a man whose patience does not last. Dark wrestled with the red cord, then released it with disgust. This bond he knots, it burns me true, till you are his this pain my due. You traded me to the Fairy King, Rosamund demanded, bracing her hands upon her hips. What if I have no desire to be his toy, or that of any other man for that matter? I will not go complacent to his court, no matter what you have promised. I pledge my word, I swore my life, and Vera will have you as his wife. How I think not. Rosamund turned her back on her vile captor, having no inclination to make such a submission easy. She surveyed the beautiful countryside and spied a man tending a pair of horses that were drinking mead on the bank. He was handsome, and his gaze was bright upon her. His hair was as dark as midnight, and if she narrowed her eyes, he could have been mistaken for Padraig. Save that Padraig had neither wings nor pointed ears. Perhaps he could aid her in finding Padraig. When the fairy knight smiled, Rosamund found herself smiling in return. I will take my heart's ease here instead, she said to Darg, and turned her back upon the creature. No, you will not. No, the brigand screamed, as once it had screamed before in Rosamund's presence. She glanced back warily, and then ran when she saw that the brigand had become a large and menacing dark cloud. When enraged, it could change its shape with frightening speed. The last eruption had led to Tinnan's death after it shattered the caverns. I saved your life. It's mine to give. I trade it now, so I shall live. Rosamund ran as quickly as she could, feeling the others fairies watching her with bemusement. She could not outrun Dark's fury, however. Her heart sank as the dark cloud enveloped her, surrounding her with fog as black as night. Then she was snatched from the ground, as helpless as a butterfly caught in a tempest and carried away. She thought she heard someone cry out, but Darg did not slow down. Finvara's wife. King or not, Rosamund had no interest in his attentions. The very fact that he would trade a fairy's life for a woman, with no consideration of any desire beyond his own, was no good endorsement. She struggled and fought, knowing it was futile. Then she wished again for a loyal friend to fight at her back. Padraig. How could she have been so blind? Padraig fondled the strange stone in his pocket as he returned to the tavern that night. It was falling dark, the sun blazing orange just before it slipped beneath the horizon. He could not dispel his dream of kissing Rosamund, and in truth, he did not want to do so. The dream had lifted the shadow from his heart and made him feel that there might be some purpose in his life, even without his partner by his side. You are fair pleased with yourself tonight, his sister said as she set an ale before him. She smiled and propped her hands on her hips to regard him. A conquest, was it then? Padraig laughed for the first time in a long time. Naught but a dream. But 'twas a fine one. I wager it must have been, she said, her smile teasing. You dreamed then of a lady? None other than the fairy queen, Padraig agreed amiably. She gave to me a token. Did she, then? Her wariness reminded Padraig of their mother. A ring with power to make a man invisible to others. Padraig chuckled at the whimsy of it all. They reached into his pocket to show her the stone. He thought she'd be amused by the evidence of this drunken dream. But when he pulled the gift from his pocket, it had become a golden ring again. Padraig stared at it in his palm and blinked in wonder. But a moment ago, it was a stone. His sister caught her breath and took a step back. A fairy gem. She crossed herself quickly. Mind your step, Padraig. A man does not easily elude the favor of the fairy queen. Padraig barely heard her warning. He knew all the tales of the Fae, courtesy of his mother. He simply could not believe that the ring had changed twice. But then, if it was Fae, the charm upon it would hold for the night and not for the day. He stood and, leaving his ale, looked out of the door of the tavern. Sure enough, the sun had set completely, and the twilight, that time so potent for the Fae, had fallen. He gazed at the circle of gold. What if his dream had been true? What if this ring truly did have the power Una had stated? What if he could reclaim Rosamund from the realm of the Fae? What if his dream of that kiss had answered his question? What was Rosamund's honest desire? Did she wish for him as well as for freedom? But before he dared enter the fairy mound, before he dared to abduct a woman destined for the High King of Fairies' bed, Padraig would be sure of the ring's power. He left a coin for the ale, having no taste for it any longer. He strode out into the streets of Galway, slipped down an alleyway, then donned the ring. To his astonishment, when he stepped back into the crowded thoroughfare, a man walked right into him, frowning at the obstacle he could feel but not see. Padraig spent an hour testing the ring's abilities, but it was clear that no human eye could discern its presence. Next, he would check it among the Fae. He borrowed a horse and rode like a madman to the stone circle where he had heard Una sing the night before. Thus Rosamund's lover true did meet the fairy queen. Thus he gained the magical ring that let him pass unseen. And so it was that he did choose to witness his lady's plight. He held his breath and donned the ring at the fairy she that night. He saw his lady Rosamund all garbed in white and gold. Her hair was braided thick with jewels, a star was on her brow. Her girdle was of finest silk, her shoes of purple leather. So radiant was her countenance, he'd never seen her measure. Rosamund was displeased. To be sure, the court was fine enough, and the hospitality was generous. She had been assigned some 24 ladies in waiting who cared more for the careful plaiting of her hair than she had ever could have done herself. She liked the splendid fabrics, the jewels, and the evident wealth. She did not like that she had been unable to escape Darg, much less the creature's hoot of triumph when Finvara had removed the red cord from its waist. The Spriggan had disappeared so quickly that he might never have been. But she did not miss that vile creature. Now Finvara was a handsome man, confident in his appeal. His eyes were strange, or at least he did not seem to match his countenance. He looked to have seen no more than 30 summers, his body young and strong, his face unlined and handsome, but his eyes were filled with the shadows of experience. There was a memory of sadness there, of joy, of triumph and defeat. Had it been her choice to meet him, had she met him when they both were unencumbered, Rosamund might have been intrigued by the fairy queen. As it was, she saw that his fascination with her was no more than lust. She would be a conquest, a mistress, a frippery, to be tossed aside when he became bored with her charms. Rosamund had never been so little and had no desire to be as much now. Indeed, his interest reminded her of Tinin's supposed love, and she would spurn it as she had failed to spurn it previously. If nothing else, Rosamund would learn from her error. Then there was the matter of Finvara's wife, Una, who had retreated to the far side of the hall. Una, no small beauty herself, had gathered her ladies about her, and they clustered there, whispering and pointing. Finvara ignored his wife so deliberately that Rosamund guessed she was but a pawn in some ongoing match between king and wife. It was far less than what she wanted of her life. She had tried to escape without success. These maidens purportedly assigned to ensure her pleasure were also charged with keeping her captive. Their hearing was sharp, their sight sharper, their vigil complete. Rosamund folded her arms across her chest, smiled thinly, and refused to participate in the festivities. If Finvara's interest waned, perhaps she would be cast out of the realm sooner. It seemed an unlikely prospect, given the gleam in his eyes when he glanced her way, but Rosamund had precious few options. She disliked this role of woman pampered. She disliked having no choice over her direction, having no ability to shape her own fate. It was utterly at odds with the way she had led her life, and Rosamund fairly itched to return to what she knew. First, somehow, she had to escape this court. The music was intoxicating, so loud and sweet and melodious. The Fae danced with a vigor that was astounding, seeming never to tire. The bounty of food was on display. It was enticing, all manner of sweets and confections offered for the pleasure of the company. The mead smelled wonderful indeed, but Rosamund feared the loss of her wits should she drink it. She simply stood and watched. The hours drew long. It was hours later, when the fairies began a vivacious dance. It was clear that Rosamund's maidens were captivated by the music, their eyes dancing, their toes tapping. Rosamund encouraged them, one after the other, to take the floor, until she finally felt unobserved. Would not last, but she would savor the interval. No sooner was she alone than a man's hand closed over her shoulders. He stood close behind her. Whoever he was, his breath in her hair, his chest at her back, Rosamund jumped, then felt her eyes widen at a familiar murmur. At your back, always. Padraig said. The feel of his breath on her neck made her tingle. Say nothing, but listen. Rosamund felt her heart skip and feared her maidens would hear its tumult. She tried to quiet her response, but she felt the strength of Padraig's fingers on her shoulders, the warmth of him against her back. She glanced down but could not see his hands. An enchantment, he murmured. Then she heard the familiar humor touch his tone. I know not how long 'twill last. Rosamund's mouth went dry. She did not doubt that Padraig would be at risk if they realized there was an intruder in their midst. She scanned the hall, endeavoring to be casual in the survey, and realized that none could see Padraig. None even guessed his presence. But then Rosamund felt Una's gaze land upon her and saw the woman smile slightly. Could Una see him? Or was she simply gladdened that Rosamund did not enjoy her celebrations? I do not know how much you know, Padraig said in a quick whisper. You are in the she of the High King of the Fairies, Finvara, and he means to make you his mistress. Rosamund nodded ever so slightly. Choose, Rosamund. Choose whether you would remain in this place, or whether you would have me aid you escape. Padraig's voice dropped low and his grip tightened slightly. I am not without my own expectation, you should be warned. I should have confessed my love for you years ago. I would love you. I would be with you. I would endeavor to make you happy. Indeed, the man could not fail at that task. Rosamund closed her eyes and overcome with joy at his words. My right hand if you would stay here, he murmured. My left if you would be mine. Without hesitation, Rosamund raised her hand as if to straighten her hair, brushed her fingertips across Padraig's left hand, and she felt him catch his breath. Una's smile broadened, turning smug, then plucked a sweet from the proffered tray. The Fairy Queen's eyes gleamed, and Rosamund feared deception. Eat nothing, Padraig warned. Drink nothing. If you consume so much as one morsel, you will be captive here forever. Rosamund touched his fingertips to indicate her understanding. She was fiercely glad that she had not taken a bite since her arrival. Tomorrow night the Fae will ride out in procession for Beltane. You must go with the company. You must ride as close to the perimeter of the group as you can. I will come for you. I will come for you. Rosamund felt the burn of his lips against her nape. She did not doubt that Padraig would face a challenge in gaining her freedom. She closed her eyes, wanting to turn into his embrace, her chest tight with the gift of his presence. Then Padraig was gone, like a shadow swallowed by the night. There was only the glitter of Una's knowing gaze locked upon her. What treachery had the Fairy Queen planned? And so the pair did plot their scheme, and so they did plan to keep their dream. But the ring's charm did not hide all. Una saw the mortal in her hall. The Fairy Queen had no good intent. Loyalty to her spouse had been spent. None could have joy while she did not. And so Una schemed her own plot. Padraig might capture his love lost, but Una ensured too high a cost. It was Beltane, and Padraig was enough of his mother's son to know that anything was possible on this night of nights. On this night, and on Samhain, the Fae were at their most potent. He made his preparations, fully aware of that. He bought the horse that he had borrowed from the ostler, and the ostler was pleased to be rid of the beast, given that it had gone missing the night before. Padraig got the steed for a better price than he might have otherwise. He prepared it with care, ensuring there was no iron in its harness, lest the Fae realized it was not one of theirs. It was a high stallion, a high-stepping black horse with a fine, proud gait. Its mane was long and dark, his eyes lit with a fire that Padraig made Padraig wonder whether it knew more of the Fae than he did. It was said that the fairies bred the best horses, and there was majesty in this one's lineage. It did not even shied at the she, but waited calmly for him at the hawthorn tree. He waited his intent, and declared to sail with the morning tide, had his ship provisioned for the journey, and kissed his sister goodbye. He cleared space in the hold to create a stable for the horse, for he had no inclination to leave her behind. He paid his debts and tried to sleep that he might be at his best when night fell. When the darkness slipped over the land, and when the Beltane fires were lit in the hills, Padraig walked his horse to the old Norman gate. His heart in his mouth, he mounted and rode out into the night, slipped the ring onto his finger when he left the road. His steed was proud, as black as night. He donned the ring, was lost to sight. The steed ran on, proud and bold, his hooves thundered on the road. The lover knew he faced his test, without his lady he'd know no rest. Lit by the fires on every hill, the heat of his ardour knew no chill. Padraig rode for his lady's heart, would the Fae Queen keep them apart? Padraig reached the stone circle, but found only silence within it. The wind was still, the ground dark. He feared he had come too late, that the host had already ridden out, or that perhaps they had guessed his intent and chosen to forego tradition to keep the prize of Rosamunde. There was much he would forego to keep her by his side. Then the wind rustled in the branches of the hawthorn that grew to one side of the stone circle. His stallion snorted and tossed its head. Then Padraig heard the clarion call of a distant trumpet. The single note was clear as a mountain string, as clear as a lovely summer morning. The sound melted his heart, dissolved his inhibitions, filled his veins with starlight and resolve. The earth in the middle of the mound cracked. It gaped wide. A portal opened in the ground, one wide enough for 4 horses to ride abreast. Padraig glimpsed the hall beneath that he had visited the night before, and his grip tightened on the reins. Golden lights spilled from the hidden court in the night's darkness, and the fairy host rode forth. Music accompanied them, the tinkle of 10,000 silver bells mounted on 1,000 harnesses. Their steeds pranced with pride, confident with their splendor and beauty. The Beltane fires on the adjacent hills burned higher as if in tribute, their flames stretching to the stars, and the Fae laughed. Padraig stared in awe at their magnificent display. Then lo, he saw the fairy host, their company more beautiful than most. He saw the silver and the gold, he saw the fairy knight so bold, he saw the maidens' garb so fine, he heard the music, saw the wine. The will-o'-the-wisp danced on the hill, fay-like glimmering and never still. The stars seemed to have come to earth as the fairy host rode in mirth, and so it was he glimpsed his lady on the left of the king of Faerie. There were horses in the company without riders, or perhaps their riders were too small to be seen. Padraig would have eased his steed to join the company, but the beast seemed to know its expectation. It marched alongside as if it had done as much a dozen times before. The fairy host flowed over the hills, eased down to the valley, ascended the next hill. Small fairies darted towards the occasional cottage, claiming whatever gifts had been left for them. They shared the milk and ale with their fellows. They lapped the porridge and cast gold coins in their wake. Each Beltane fire they passed snapped and crackled in acknowledgment of their passage, and Finvara laughed at the sight. His wife, riding on his right, smiled with no joy in her eyes. Neither was there joy in the steady gaze of Rosamunde. Padraig eased his horse closer to the royalty, stroking its neck to encourage it to pass between the other beasts. The stallion needed little encouragement, and Padraig considered the possibility that horses felt a natural attraction to the fairy king, just as the Beltane fire flames acknowledged his presence. Padraig did not know how long they rode, nor how far. He thought solely of getting closer to Rosamunde without attracting attention, and he made consistent progress in that goal. They crossed a vale, ascended another hill. When they reached the top, the shining dark water of Loch Caleb was visible, gleaming at the foot of the hills. There were more stars on this night than he had ever seen. The moon rose high in pearly splendor. When they began to descend the hill, Padraig's horse eased so close that he could touch the hem of Rosamunde's dress. It was time. He spurred his horse, he galloped near, he seized the lady he loved so dear. He stole her from the fairy host, claimed she Finvara desired most. The Fae did scream, the horse did run, Finvara shouted 'twould not be done. Hold fast, Rosamunde cried, for she would steal you from my side. And so he held with all his might, even as Zuna unleashed her spite. The company jostled for position as they began the descent. The Fae were celebratory and less disciplined than when they had first left the hall. Their laughter was louder, their songs more merry. Padraig lunged to the company with purpose. He dug his heels into the stallion's side. The horse leaped with power. Padraig snatched Rosamunde from her steed, his arms locked around her waist, and placed her on the saddle before him. Then he fled. As the stallion raced down the hill, the golden ring upon Padraig's finger cracked in half. It fell from his hand and was trampled beneath the horse's hooves, leaving him revealed to the fairy. "Impostor! Thief! Thief!" They all cried aloud. "Fetch my mistress!" bellowed Finvara. Padraig gave horse his heels. The steed raced down the hill ahead of the fairy host, running so quickly the ground was a blur beneath his feet. "Faster!" Rosamunde urged, glancing back. "Faster!" Padraig heard Una's song rise sweetly in the distance, but did not trust her ode. "Padraig!" Rosamund said, locking her arms around his neck.
She means to make you spurn me. Be not deceived.
Padraig guessed the test he would face, a heartbeat before it began.
They will turn me into an ancient crone, a woman wrought of sinew and bone, a cold-blooded body from the grave. Hold fast, my love, you must be brave.
In his embrace, Rosamund turned to a hag, appearing to have endured 1,000 years of hardship. Her skin was wrinkled like ancient leather, her eyes yellow, her teeth missing. And she cackled at him, this apparition, and looked fit to devour him. Padraig could see the bones of her skull beneath the loose flesh of her face. He could smell the fetid stench of decay, and he felt the clutch of her skeletal fingers on his neck. Everything within him was repulsed. His urge was to cast her aside with all speed. Padraig told himself it was but a spell, and he held fast.
Next I'll be a writhing snake with a toxic bite your life to take. I will be as slippery as an adder. My release lies solely in your power.
Rosamund changed then to an enormous snake, green and slippery in Padraig's grasp. The snake bared its fangs, and malice lit its eyes as it reared back to strike. He had no doubt its bite was poisonous, but he did not release it. There were, after all, no snakes in Ireland. Padraig knew that this, too, was but a Fae trick. He heard Una's song, realized it was growing in volume, and he knew there would be worse to come. 3 tests there would be, as much as he guessed as much, and they would become more fierce. He held fast to the writhing green snake, and he hoped he could keep hold of Rosamund. The horse ran, outdistancing the shouting host at its heels. The snake twisted in his grip, as elusive as a fish, but Padraig held tightly. The water of the lake drew ever more near, and he wondered what the horse would do. He thought to direct it around the body of water, then Rosamund changed shape again.
At last I will become a flame, and hot and fierce as ever came, a Beltane fire, orange and hot. My love, release me not.
In the blink of an eye, Rosamund became a fire in his embrace. The brilliant light of the flames nearly blinded Padraig, and surprise almost loosened his grip. He cried out and tightened his grasp upon her. The fire burned his skin, the flames licking at his flesh. He closed his eyes to the sight of his own body burning, to the smell of his own destruction. He held fast to the column of flame, even as he feared he could not have the strength to endure against the Fae. Padraig thought of the way Rosamund's hair looked in the sunlight. He recalled her bold stance on the ship as they sailed to adventure. He remembered the light in her eyes when they had first met. He thought of her determination, even when the Spriggan Darg had stolen her charts and trapped the ship in a column. He recalled her pride in her nieces and her joy in seeing them well wed. He thought of her passion, her pride, and he fortified himself with the truth of why he loved this woman with all his heart. Padraig squeezed his eyes shut as the pain built to a crescendo. He could not lose his love. He recited the Paternoster, on impulse recalling his mother's counsel. Tears stung his cheeks as he said the familiar prayer, Our Father. The horse halted abruptly, reared, and then ducked its head. Padraig was thrown over his neck and gasped aloud as he landed in the lake with a splash. He sank low, still holding fast to Rosamund. The cold, dark water of the lake embraced them. He felt the flame in his arms turn to a woman again. A naked woman he loved more than life itself. And Padraig knew he had triumphed. They broke the surface together. Rosamund's smile enough to light Padraig's nights forevermore. When they might have spoken to the other, a man cleared his throat at their close proximity. Finvara stood on the shore, holding the bridle of the stamping black stallion. And so, the contest goes to you, the High King of the Faerie said. He stroked the horse's nose with affection, and the beast nuzzled him. Finvara smiled, and his eyes glinted. I shall take this horse into my care, seeing as it was once stolen from us, and it is rightfully returned. Padraig understood why the horse had not been startled by the Fae, why it had been so at ease joining the host. Recognition was possibly why it had been allowed to join the company in the first place. He understood then why it had thrown him and saved Rosamund. Padraig fancied the horse had intended to reward him for bringing it back to Finvara. You are a man of more cunning than most, Finvara smiled. I should have liked to have played chess with you. With respect, my lord, I have little to my name and nothing I would choose to lose. Padraig kept his arm around Rosamund, noting how the king's gaze flickered between the two of them. Should his devotion falter, Finvara said to Rosamund, you are always welcome at my court.
I thank you, my lord, and I thank you for your hospitality,
Rosamund said with a bow. You and your fellows will always find welcome at our home, Patrick added with a bow of his own. Finvara smiled, his gaze trailing to his wife, who remained upon her steed at a distance. It is no crime to covet a beauteous gem, he said softly, but a rare triumph to possess one. I salute you, Patrick. May your love never be tarnished. And with that, Finvara turned and led the prancing horse back to the company. Patrick felt the chill of the night air in his wet skin as he stood with Rosamund fast at his side, but he could not tear his gaze away from the departing company. He doubted he would ever see them again. They rode forth, passing over the hills like a vision, leaving only the echo of their silvery laughter behind. And Rosamund.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick,
she said, smiling up at him. You're welcome. I'm glad to see you hail again. Patrick stared down at her, knowing his desire, but afraid to speak of it too soon. Rosamund, as was typical of her, showed no such restraint. She twined her arms around his neck, sliding her fingers into his hair.
I am so sorry, Patrick, that I erred so badly. I love you. I think I've always loved you, but I wish I had seen the truth of it sooner.
Patrick bent to touch his lips to hers, his heart swelling that his dream should be his own. Her dream should be his own. I know that I have always loved you, he murmured against her mouth. Rosamund laughed.
Then I shall have to spend the rest of our lives atoning for my error.
I do not think it will be so onerous.
Nor do I.
Patrick laughed at the prospect, and then he sobered. Rosamund's eyes were the richest green, filled with conviction that stole his breath away. Marry me, Rosamund. Marry me and seal our bond for all to see. I have little to offer you but myself.
Your ship?
Your ship. The contents are yours as well. I have only myself.
It is more than enough. I will wed you, Patrick Dean, and I will honor your love every day and night of my life.
It's everything you'd ever wanted, and yet more. Rosamund's kiss sent a welcome heat through Patrick, a heat that her presence would never fail to kindle. Patrick knew that whatever he had suffered had been worthwhile, for he had gained his heart's desire. When he lifted his head, her eyes were sparkling, her cheeks were flushed. She glanced about herself and shivered.
Tell me, though, that we can sail to warmer climes.
I thought Sicily, Patrick said, smiling as pleasure lit her expression. With the morning tide, all is prepared.
I'm a man of confidence and one in pursuit of my own heart.
And I thought I possessed that prize already, he teased, loving the sound of her answering laughter.
You do. You too.
Then Rosamund raised a hand to his cheek, as solemn as he had ever seen her. Her voice dropped to a fervent whisper.
Oh, Patrick, never doubt that I am yours.
A tear glistened in her eye, a tear that he knew was rare for this bold woman.
I may have been late to see the truth, but I shall never forget it now.
And I shall never forget it, he retorted, then winked. Rosamund smiled and swung into his arms, and then strode from the lake. He had an idea of how they might warm themselves before the walk back to town. One glance at his lady told him that their thoughts were as one. Yet again they would challenge convention, and yet again they would follow their hearts, and from this day forth they would do so together. And it was as close to heaven as Patrick Dean ever expected to be. Patrick gained his lady's heart. She vowed they'd never be apart. Rosamund was a pirate queen, with hair red gold and eyes of green. Her lover true did hold her fast, should all the Fae his love would last. They ne'er forgot those Faerie, and lived out their days most happily.